Thanks for joining me on episode 470 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Robert Farrington from thecollegeinvestor.com. I encourage you to be inspired to become a better steward through financial wisdom by listening to this show, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with my friend Scott Mader.
Of people living great that in reality are living out these exact mistakes that I'm talking about. We don't talk about money in a healthy way. We don't share with each other about what's going on in our lives when it comes to money. We don't actually work with each other in any sort of real way around money. And because of that, we don't even know we're making these sorts of money mistakes. Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world. In today's episode about developing your influence through stewarding your treasures, I talk with you about some of the big money mistakes we make, why most folks don't even realize they are making these sorts of money mistakes, and why awareness is the first step to improvement in your money. As we talk about stewarding your treasures, wouldn't it be great if you could support this podcast and do it without costing yourself an extra dime? Turns out you can. All you have to do is use inspiredstewardship.com/Amazon when you're ready to make a purchase via Amazon, and a small commission will come back to support the show. If you enjoy the show when you're ready to buy from Amazon, just use inspiredstewardship.com/Amazon. Let's talk about money and mistakes. You know, the truth is most of us have made different money mistakes in our life. If you're listening to this and you're older than, 12 or 13 years old, and probably even if you're a teenager, you've already made some things and some decisions with money that when you look back on them, you're like, that was such a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done it that way. I've made my share of money mistakes. My wife and I have made our share of money mistakes since we've gotten married. And the truth is that you can't ever really avoid money mistakes completely, but there are ways that you can begin to think about them and recognize them before you make them. So if you look online, if you Google biggest money mistakes, you'll find list after list after list of, the 5 biggest money mistakes that everyone makes, the 7 biggest money mistakes people make as young adults, the 7 biggest mistakes that people make before retirement with money, the 10 biggest money mistakes ever made, whatever. There's list after list after list of all of these money mistakes that people make. And oftentimes they'll have very specific things in there, like not saving for retirement, or not getting certain kinds of insurance in place, or not taking care of this or that. But the truth is, if you really look at the money mistakes that people make, they kind of boil down into a lot of broad categories. One of those categories is not having a plan. There's different versions of this. Sometimes it can be not doing a budget. Sometimes it can be not saving for retirement. Sometimes it can be not looking at your career the correct way and planning how you're going to grow in your career. It can be staying in the wrong job, or it could be leaving a job too soon. These are all versions of not really planning and thinking about how the money's going to work, both short term and long term. One of the keys that I found in life is that generally the decision that feels really, really good in the short term isn't always the best decision over the long term. And conversely, the decision that feels pretty bad in the short term often ends up being the better decision over many, many, many years. It's hard to have money taken out of your paycheck and put it away for retirement. But the truth is, over a long period of time, that can really help you. So there's all sorts of money mistakes that people make that fall into this category of not planning. Another category of money mistake is this one of not managing risk. That involves insurances, that involves taking care of your physical well-being and your emotional well-being. That involves things like having an emergency fund or having other things in place to take care of you beyond just credit cards and debt. It's about managing the risk in your life in a very good way. That's a category of mistake because oftentimes we spend way too long thinking that it's never going to happen to me, when the truth is, it is going to happen to you. You just don't know when. And so managing risk is a category to have play defense on your money. And the last category, the last one is this idea of not really focusing attention on the right thing. And here's what I mean by that. Oftentimes there's categories of people that put all of their attention on income. They're constantly trying to raise their income. They're getting a better job. They're doing things that cause them to make more money, but they don't pay any attention to the spending side. And so they still spend more than they make. Even if they make $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year, they still manage to spend more than they make. Conversely, there's people that focus all of their attention on the expense side. They're not living frugal. They're living cheap. They're actually, reusing paper towels because they're so worried about spending any money. They're never going on any sort of pleasurable trip, even though they have millions of dollars in the bank. They almost turn into a hoarder about money and things. And emotionally, they're not happy because they're really focused only on the expense side. The truth is that the real mistake is focusing on the pieces instead of the whole picture. When you look at both sides of the equation and you begin to recognize that the truth is it's not how much you make and it's not how much you spend, it's the difference between those and what you do with it that begins to give you power over time, then all of a sudden you gain real control over your money and the growth of that money. And that's a huge mistake that I see people make all the time. But the truth is, most folks don't even realize they're making these sorts of broad money mistakes because our culture tends to hold up in front of us all of these examples of people living great that in reality are living out these exact mistakes that I'm talking about. We don't talk about money in a healthy way. We don't share with each other about what's going on in our lives when it comes to money. We don't actually work with each other in any sort of real way around money. And because of that, we don't even know we're making these sorts of money mistakes. And awareness is the first step to improving anything. The truth is, if you don't know there's anything wrong, you're never going to fix it. And oftentimes in money, that comes about because of a disaster, because something goes horribly wrong, and that brings awareness to you, and now you're ready to change. But the truth is, it doesn't have to come that way. You can actually get awareness without having a huge failure. You can actually gain awareness and make a change even if you've never made one of these money mistakes. You can actually put the right things in place even from a very young age. If the people around you speak health into your life instead of speaking all of the myths and the disasters and the habits that we form instead that are so wrong around money. And you too can do this. Even if you've made all of these money mistakes throughout your life, even if you've messed it up and now you're 50, you're 60, you're 70 years old, but now you're ready to change, there's still time to work on it. And if you're young and you work on it now, you have tremendous power in the future to change not just your own life, but the lives of others as well. Thanks for listening. Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you like this episode on the stewardship of treasures, you can sign up for our treasures tips by going to inspiredstewardship.com/treasures or text in the U.S. 44222 treasures tips. And we'll send you 5 weeks of our best tips on stewarding your treasures. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.